Welcome back to Cosmosis or Whatever. I'm Celia Marie 1243, your spirit guide, whisperer, psychic mentor, your guide in eliminating your shadows so that you can live your very best life. I am your podcast host, and I'm really excited to get into today's episode. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot, so I went ahead and jotted down all of my thoughts about it, so I kind of have somewhat of a script. I'm an ADHD girl, maybe you are too, and we gotta write things down sometimes just to keep us on track. So today we're gonna be talking not all things, but some things about breaking generational curses, especially breaking generational curses as young women and being single. And what really brought that to my attention, or what really made me want to do this as an episode, is I feel like I had a lot of young women, and it was in clusters. My clients show up in kind of like energy clusters is what I call them, where maybe one for 1 week or 1 month or just a certain amount of time, right? Patterns that I recognize where people are kind of talking about the same issues or have the same energy. And in this specifically, what led me to speak about this is I had a lot of young women, maybe ages, like 18 to 26, 27, asking me what is wrong with them, right? And in tarot readings, right? In tarot readings, energy sessions, asking me what's wrong with them, why are they single, when will they find love? And a lot of them, they don't ask that straight up. It immediately kind of starts my engine with what I'm about to talk about, just because I'm so passionate about it, having been someone who I think has broken a lot of generational curses from my own family as well, especially by not getting married early, and still not being married now as a 30-year-old woman. I'm a Black woman. I am a person of color. I'm also queer, and we'll talk a little bit more about, the intersectionality and how that plays into things later. But some of these young ladies don't say that per se, and they just say love, like, oh, let me hear about love. And through tapping into their energy, talking to their spirit guides, their ancestors, you guys know it's my job to read between the lines, aka kind of get into the energy and see what's really going on. What is the energy behind the question? What are you really asking, and what is really needing to be healed here? So we're going to get into all of that. As I was saying, it is my job to read between those lines, get into the energy. I am a light worker, but I'm a shadow worker. I am a Scorpio rising. I love to get into the shadows of it all, the shadow work of it all. I help people to understand their subconscious patterning, so that they can experience the best path the universe has to offer them. And I really like to go deep and help people understand that, because a lot of times what I've seen in the tarot world, when you're asking what's wrong with you, or, why are you single? When are you not going to be single? A lot of times, more often than not, it's really about getting down to the limiting belief that being single is somehow wrong, or it's bad, or that something is wrong with you if you are single at whatever age, honestly. And that is not true. It's really something that I feel like a lot of society has to unlearn. I really feel like me doing this work is a huge contribution to that. So if you find yourself listening to this episode, or even now, if you know a young lady or even just a young person who could benefit from hearing about this, about breaking these generational curses, especially by being single and understanding those things, please share with them. I think it would be really, really helpful. And I think overall, there's a lot of societal shifts that need to happen, and they won't happen unless we are talking about things like this. So something that I always kind of start off by saying to these young ladies, I always remind them And usually the energy, the cards are kind of telling me to say this, but like it's almost automatic at this point, not from an ego standpoint, but intuitively, right? I let them know, like I remind them, and maybe you need this reminder too, that you are a full person. Okay, no man, no partner is here to complete you. And I think a lot of people, that sounds good and it sounds almost cliche, right? And a lot of people were like, yeah, of course, duh. But people don't really believe that deep down because we see a lot of messaging, right? In songs, in movies, in media, in family influences, which we'll talk a lot more about. But like I said, the recent readings that I've been doing around this topic were very focused on the family influences in these young ladies' lives. And I really want to speak more about it. We all need to unlearn this. I had this belief that I was supposed to be completed by somebody, that I needed to be with a man specifically, right? And as a queer person, that's like a whole different can of worms. But I felt like I needed to be with somebody in order to feel complete. I think that is messaging that our society kind of puts out there through movies, through music. How many princess movies or movies that aren't even necessarily about princesses are all about finding this man or finding a partner so that you can become a complete whole person. Working with my guides and ancestors, I have been able to get a more clear picture and recognize some of these limiting beliefs that I've had about, being single or being by myself. And I've been able to unlearn, release a lot of it, and just give myself compassion for the version of myself that really needed those beliefs to kind of survive at the time. But at the same time, holding myself accountable and breaking down those beliefs into something that better serves me and my life and my children's lives. My future children, because I don't have any yet. I have a spirit baby floating around. I talked about it on another episode. And so I want everybody to know too that I'm not saying that something is wrong with being in a relationship. This is by no means a man bashing episode or, a relationship bashing episode saying like, you can just be single. You don't need any, there are extremes and I'm not trying to go to any of those extremes at all. There's nothing wrong with desiring a relationship, especially a healthy relationship. That's completely normal. There is nothing inherently wrong with a woman being single either. And that's really where I am trying to focus and the healing that it kind of takes to really not only know and understand and feel that, but like really live it out in your everyday life. Help heal that part of anyone with these limiting beliefs. Help us to recognize these patterns of codependency in our life, just kind of building that self-awareness, healing generational curses, unlearning our unhealthy societal norms. And there's a lot of them. This is just one. And I'll talk about the other ones, but this is just one that really is near and dear to my heart, stood out for me, and I wanted to talk about. So what is a generational curse? Forgive me, I'm a little tongue-tied today. What is a generational curse? Generational curse is something that negatively affects someone caused by actions, beliefs, or practices by our ancestors, or even just older members of our family, people from the past, and those things being passed on into future generations. I will say that some of them can be very apparent, right? Some generational curses could be, just off the top of my head, let's see, divorce. That could be a generational curse. Having kids too young or really young could be a generational curse. Being poor or having a poverty consciousness. You don't have to be poor to have a poverty consciousness. That could be something that's passed down, right? So just these ideas or beliefs or practices that get passed down. And like I said, they could also be passed down through DNA, especially the things that we live through as trauma can get passed down through our blood, our genes, literally. And they aren't always the most apparent thing, right? I named some that are, they stick out, but you can go deeper than that. You may not have knowledge, or you may have knowledge and you're unsure about how it is negatively impacting you. Maybe you don't know how to unlearn these generational curses, but you can end certain generational curses with just your dedication to healing, dedication to understanding yourself. I know a lot of generational curse breakers, myself included, tend to get a little bit shaken up or discouraged on their journey because it feels like a lot of weight on your shoulders. But I want to also remind any of my generational curse breakers that this is about you healing yourself, and then that overflow trickles on to the next generations. It's not solely for anybody else, if that makes sense. Like you are a part of a bigger picture just by focusing on yourself. So I don't want you to feel like if you mess up in any part of your journey, that you're just, oh, well, I just let all the ancestors down, or I let my future generations down, or whatever. No, you're focusing on yourself. And like I said, all of that will kind of inherently trickle down. So don't put so much pressure on yourself from outside sources. Let this be something that you really want to do for yourself. But then you also do make those connections to the past and the future in the most healthy and beautiful ways by doing this. So it is important to also know that many generational curses are influenced by the time period that these people, our ancestors, lived in, right? And the surrounding cultural structures and societal norms that happened at that time. I feel like in this time, in 2023, where we've come so far, we can still be so held back by certain things that just have been perpetuated through actions and behaviors and things that we've seen that we just haven't had enough awareness to let go of. So divine timing is always at play. Everything is always connected. Divine timing is always at play. I think we're living in a time with so many more resources and ways to get information. And I'm so glad to be a part of this. I really do feel like it's a huge purpose of mine in this lifetime is to help people with those resources and information and give you guys questions to think about these things and make podcast episodes on these types of topics, because, hundreds of years ago, we weren't necessarily, I wasn't there, but, we weren't necessarily talking about things like this topic, or if we were, it probably wasn't on as big of a stage as it can be now, which is a really beautiful thing. And I feel like this knowledge deserves to be spread for everybody's well-being. The earth becomes a better place the more and more of us who know these things. I'll say I found myself being upset, honestly, in my journey as a generational curse breaker. I found myself being upset with my older family members. Not me about to cry. Okay. I found myself being upset with my older family members and ancestors because, it's like, you have all this trauma to heal. And by you, I mean me, but you, all of us. You have all this to heal and you're like, damn, like you guys couldn't do none of it. Like you couldn't have just, you couldn't have made a different choice. Like because you didn't make a different choice, now I have to do all of it. And to that, I'll say, for anybody who has or is feeling like that, remember that there are a bunch of generational strengths that have also been passed down to you as well. Never, ever, ever forget that either. The fact that you're even here, it is a way of saying that your bloodline was strong enough to carry you to this point. Or, maybe not even bloodline if you were, adopted, or in Hawaii, we call it hanaid, right? Like if you were raised by somebody other than your blood family, but it's like, it's all family. Your ancestors, the people who came before you, still paved the way for you to be the one to make the change happen, right? And that's why I said that like generational curses can be influenced by those time periods. There could have been things that it had to be in this time period for you to actually do it. It was harder to do a lot of things back in certain times. So just keep that in mind and keep gratitude in your heart for all the people who have come before you, who have also made hard decisions that you might not even know about, who did work hard to break curses that might not have been able to, or who have, but you don't exactly know how that might have played out, but you are benefiting from. Very important to know and think about. And just imagine all of the generations in the future living happier, being happier because you are choosing to work on yourself without being young, especially as a woman or a femme, being young and single, aka unmarried, is honestly a way that a lot of us, I've noticed, are breaking generational curses. One that my client, I feel like, was breaking or is working on breaking, and you can break it too. Some things to consider if you feel like this is a generational curse that you are breaking, or even if you don't know yet that you are, maybe this will help you realize that you are. The time period I said earlier, it makes a difference. It has a huge effect. Women of our great-grandmothers, grandmothers, and even our mothers' generations in some cases had way less education and rights. They couldn't read, a lot of them. They couldn't write. They couldn't own land. They weren't able to vote. They couldn't have certain jobs, if they could have jobs that they were paid for at all. Okay, that's something really important to think of. As a young woman or just a woman, think about what your family history looks like with that. How far does it take you back? Probably only a couple generations to a time where, women could not do these things. And then, of course, we have the intersection of Black and POC women. When we get into slavery, when we get into indentured servitude, class definitely has a huge effect on all of these things as well, in negative and positive ways. I know, like my ancestors, my maternal grandmother was an immigrant from Samoa. She was a mail order bride. My paternal grandmother was Black, and she had kids. She started having kids at about 15 years old. 15. Imagine you at 15. Imagine your 15-year-old kid or cousin or brother or sister, 15 years old, she started having kids, and she had 16 kids. My client's mother, when we got into the energy and I got into asking her some questions, I found out that my client, who inspired me to do this, her mother had married young and her grandmother had married young. And so here she is in this place, in this time period, with completely different rights, a completely different political climate, kind of ish, but the same mindset, right? The same mindset. And that is how those generational curses work, y'all. It's something that kind of gets passed down and we don't always really know why. Even when things start to change, it's like we have to start to change too. That doesn't just happen automatically. You hear a lot in this society, or I've heard a lot in this society, a lot of podcast bros saying things like women don't cook and clean like they used to. But if you really think about it, at a certain point, that's all we could do as women. That's all we were allowed to do, like literally allowed. I know only a couple generations back, if my Black, especially female ancestors would have been caught reading, do you know that they would have been put to death, blinded, something? Like, you know what I mean? There was punishments for those types of things. And so my generation, the generation after that, will have different climates, and that is an opportunity to make that change and not carry things with us that don't serve us. That's not to say get rid of everything, because there are a lot of things, like I said, that we've gotten from our ancestors that do serve us, but it's our responsibility to stop carrying things that don't serve us and our lineage and our energy. A lot of women have been so dependent on men for money, for shelter, to travel. Do you know women could only vote starting in the 1920s? I'm not a huge history buff. That's my dad. He's the history buff. But I did do my little research. 1920s, that's barely over 100 years, you guys. And not all Black women especially started even voting in the 1920s. It took several decades later for a lot of them to. Do your research. But women of our mother's generations, they carried that on in a lot of ways. I know my mom was married at 18, 19. She lost her parents very young. Shout out to my mommy. Love her. It's her birthday today, actually. Happy birthday, Mom. Not me about to cry. And not me seeing my grandmother's face in my third eye. Hi, Grandma. She lost her parents very young. And, everybody has our own stories, our generational stories, our historic things about what has happened to us, whether that be trauma or, like I said, just things being passed down that we didn't quite know were not the best for us at the time. But think about being with somebody, if getting married at 15, 16, 17, 18 was your only freaking choice that you had. Of course, you're just going to do it. A lot of people, of course, they're just going to do it. If that is the climate that you're in, if that's what's expected of you, you're just going to do it. And I did another podcast episode. If you guys didn't hear it, it's I think it's called Stop Being on Autopilot. Scroll down a couple before this one and you'll see it. But if this is all resonating with you, that one will definitely resonate with you as well, because it kind of goes hand in hand, where it's like, don't just do things because everybody else before you has done them. And a lot of us are doing that unconsciously. And that's where the shadow work comes in, you guys. That's where getting a reading with somebody who will go deep into that energetic pattern and help you realize, hey, this is something you probably want to let go for your highest good. Getting married at 18, and this is no offense to anybody who's gotten married young, but how many of us knew who we were at 18 years old? I was engaged at 19, actually. I had all of these different plans for my life, who I wanted to be, what I wanted to be, who I wanted to be with, and I held marriage and being with somebody in such a high regard. And not that I don't now, because I still very much respect relationships, and I think marriage is the ultimate commitment to somebody. But I was in a place at that age, at that time, I was in a place where it was coming from a codependency place. A lot of times, I think young girls especially, not only are we taught that it's almost like we're worthless or we're not good enough if we get married young. It's like, oh, well, if somebody didn't snatch you up while you're young, like, what's wrong with you? Are you ugly? Can you not cook? Are you promiscuous? Like, whatever that might look like, which I think gets perpetuated by men and women in our society constantly, like I said, through movies, through people's actions. And don't fall for it. Don't buy into it. Change that narrative for yourself. Call people out when they are going along with that narrative, because that's how change really starts. Our brain isn't even fully developed at, 18, 19. And like I said, that's not an attack on women who marry young. It's just something to think about. This whole episode is something to think about for women who feel pressured to marry young, or have been married young and are in marriages that don't really serve them, and they're trying to force it to work, because that's another group of people that I get a lot in my sessions, in my readings. Or women who have maybe been in relationships since they were young and now are also super desperate for that love and attention that comes from a relationship, but they haven't actually cultivated that in themselves first in order for a relationship to be on a strong foundation. And I completely relate to that, because been there, done that. I don't know how many times. This is honestly the first relationship that I've been in that feels so healthy. Conflict resolution, being able to really see the person as a partner and not feeling like I have to do things all myself or they have to do things all themselves, where I can express my feelings openly. And I want that for everybody, but I don't want people, especially young women. I have all younger sisters. I don't want any of them or anybody their age, anybody younger. I don't want anybody to feel like you have to be with somebody in order to mean something, because that's not true. It's time to start looking at these types of patterns, whether they be within yourself, within people before you, with your parents, with your past relationships, and see where can there be a change. If you need help, you guys know where to find me. But just something to think about. There are so many ways that we perpetuate these generational curses, but there are so many ways, especially with awareness, that we can change them, even if it's bit by bit. Just take a look at your past, your ancestors' past. See if and where, just by you working on yourself and making changes and doing things maybe a little bit differently, even if that rubs people the wrong way, that you can help your kids, that you can help the future generations to thrive and release these limiting beliefs and these generational curses. This is such a near and dear topic to my heart. It won't be the last time that we talk about generational curses for sure, because they're so important. There's so many of them that we could get into. I like I've mentioned, I think multiple times here, but I'm going to say it again. I really feel like it is my life purpose to help people to understand those things and release themselves from them, because I'm in the act of doing that myself now. It's not easy, and people deserve support in those types of journeys. You're not alone. So if you need me, find me on my website. You guys know I can help. Thank you for listening so much. Shine bright, and remember,